This
Velocys
conference will now be recorded.
Velocys System Private Limited. So I working in a e-health project under Digital India. We have a project e-hospital where I come to know that HL7 is a terminology and we are using it HL7 for lab integrations, LIS integrations, PAC. Uh, so so that's why I'm really interested in HL7. So we have a one HMIS application that is built by Government of India, and that is
Okay.
being implemented in across the all the hospitals of India, state government hospital, central government hospitals. So that is built by NIC, that is National Informatics Center. So I work. My client is NIC.
Okay.
So that's why I learned. That's why I want to learn to HL7.
Okay. Okay. All right. No problem. Uh, so Adi, am I pronouncing that right? I am not sure. I guess you won't be able to talk. Uh, all right, Adi. So we'll probably talk some other time, but today we'll go through the session. Um, so so to just a little bit about myself, I have been in healthcare industry for the past 10 years. So I was working mainly, my main focus was mainly on integrations, HL7 integrations with various interface engines like Mirth integration engine, Rhapsody integration buddy, Connector. So there are many interface engines out there in the market. So these are few which I worked on, and my main work included implementing interfaces between different healthcare systems like lab information system, hospital information system, and also uh, with various HIEs, which are health integration enterprises, where we used to involve mainly in implementing interfaces and also architecting how the interfaces has to be in order to go ahead and integrate between all of these different systems. So in this training, we'll cover mainly, this training is completely divided into two sections. First section will be the functional section where we'll be looking at what are the aspects of HL7, how HL7 has come into play, the structure of HL7, and what are the various message types, what are the various events that we cover during the real-time transactions and during the what happens during the real-time world and what are the transactions that are involved in the real-time world. So we will be covering that completely, and we'll also be covering few aspects from certification perspective, so that you can go ahead and prepare for your certification if you want to go for that. And the second section is all about technical, where we will be looking at an integration tool called as Mirth Connect or Next Gen interface engine, which is a freeware, but at the same time, being a freeware, it is robustly used in the healthcare industry because of its solid options and robust options that we have. And so we'll be looking in detail about the Mirth integration engine, how we go ahead and set up interfaces on that engine, and how exactly we will formulate constructing an HL7 message. How do we interact with databases in order to extract data and construct an HL7 message, and also how we interpret an HL7 message, how we write it to database, how we communicate the HL7 message to different systems that we are trying to connect to. All of these things will be covered in the second section, second part of the training. So in case if you have any questions, you can stop me. Today we'll be looking at the basic introduction on how HL7, how the name has come, what is the name, uh, what does the name indicate, and what is the message structure. So that will be the portion that we'll be covering today. So in case if you have any questions, you can stop me and ask me. And Ari, If you have any questions, you can just post it on the chat. I will try to respond. Right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we'll quickly look at what we will be covering by the end of this session. So by the end of this session, we'll get to know where we are seeing, or where does HL7 come into picture from, what is HL7 and why it is used, how the name has been derived, and what is an interface, and what is the role of HL7 in interfaces, and also what is interoperability and the HL7 message structure. Before that, we need to understand few general terms, um, because these are the components which we will be using in order to explain how HL7 is used, where HL7 is used, and all. So PM is nothing but a practice management system. Practice management system is an application used by the front-end staff, like receptionist or the front-end managers, where they will be taking the basic details of patients and storing them in their application. So as soon as we go to the hospital, first thing that we do is we reach out to the receptionist. So the receptionist will be using PM application. So this is kind of used to manage the entire hospital, where they will store patient details and where they will schedule appointments for patients, and also they will handle billing, like charges of the patients and all. The next one is EHR. EHR is electronic health record. So this is also a software application which is used by the doctors, where they will store clinical data related to patient within that system, like what are the allergies patient has, if he is going through some medication, if the patient is going through some medication, that information will be stored in the clinical record. And in case if there are any lab orders, lab tests, all of that information will be stored in EHR. Then HIS, HI is Hospital Information System. The network with forms within the hospital by connecting PM, EHR, and in case if there is an in-house lab, all of those are integrated with each other and they become an ecosystem called as Hospital Information System. And then we will come to lab information system. In case if hospital information system is connected to a laboratory which is outside the premises, outside the hospital premises, then that is called as, they both will integrate with each other and they will form a lab information system as well. Then ICD is International Classification of Diseases. So for each disease, there is a code from an international perspective, and all of those codes are maintained by a body who will draft all the diseases under ICD classification. So each disease will have one code which we will use to represent what the patient has been diagnosed with. For example, if there is a fever has a code, and whenever doctor is updating his records or records in the clinical health record or EHR, electronic health record, they will use that code to indicate that patient has this problem. And then CPT, this is current procedural terminology, which is nothing but these are also codes, list of codes which will indicate what treatment has been given to the patient. So in case if there is any wound and doctor has to stitch the wound up, then they will use some code to indicate that there has been some procedure that has been performed. And then CCD is continuity of care document. This is like an entire summary of a patient record, which will include if a patient is visiting the hospital and leaving the hospital on the same day, or whether he is an inpatient or outpatient. When the patient comes in, he will have certain things done for that particular day. So when he is leaving, he will be given a printout, or he will be given his entire record is stored in the form of a CCD, so that in case if someone wants to take a look at it, they can take a look at it to understand what treatment patient has gone through. So we'll look into CCD more at the end of the training, where I'll be explaining why CCD has come into picture and how it is used in HIEs and all. So HI is Health Information Exchange, which is an ecosystem where two or more hospitals are interconnected with each other with the help of this health information exchange, so that the patient data sharing can happen between two or more different hospitals for a greater care of the patient. And then IHE is nothing but integrating health enterprise. So this is a standard like HL7. So with the help of IHE, we will be integrating all the hospitals with HI. So IHE is a standard, HIE is an ecosystem, or HIE is a software application which will help integrating all different hospitals. Okay, and next we have, so before we talk more about HL7, we have to understand the hospital workflow. Reason being, um, during the entire training, for most of the time, we'll be referring back to the real-time events that are happening to understand the workflows better and to understand the message structure, HL7 message structure, as well as HL7 message contents better. So in order to understand that, we first need to understand the hospital workflow properly, and we will be looping back to this workflow many a times during the entire training. So during the hospital workflow, as we all know, we visit the receptionist. Once we go there, they will ask us for the first time whether we are visiting the hospital for the first time or whether we have been there already. If it is first time, they will take all the demographic details like first name, last name, date of birth, gender, and if the patient has insurance or not. All of this information will be collected and that will be stored in the PM system. So these basic details of the patients are referred to as demographics. After that, the receptionist will ask whether we want to meet a doctor, which doctor we want to meet, what is the department that we want to visit for, and we will provide those details. Patient will provide those details, and that will be registered, and an appointment will be generated for the patient in the PM application. Once the appointment is generated, this appointment information is sent to doctor so the doctor can know who the patient is and what is what is his name and at what time the patient is going to come. And next we have once the patient visits the doctor, we have once the patient visits the doctor, we have doctor doctor examining the patient. So they will try to determine what happened to the patient. If they are okay, just by looking at the patient, if they say that this is the problem, then well and good. So most of the times we see that doctor might not be able to figure out 50-50 chances. There are 50-50 chances where doctor might be able to say just by looking at the patient what is the problem. And the other 50 is they will schedule or they will place some orders like urine test or blood test or some other MRI to determine or to take an in-depth look on what the problem patient is facing. So during that course, they will go ahead and place an order. So that order will be sent to lab. Now the patient visits the lab, will get his test done, and from there the results will be sent back to the provider. Provider in the sense, here we refer doctors as providers. So the results will be sent back to the doctor, and from there we can see that in case if there are any charges, which means as the patient is visiting the lab will definitely incur some charges. And as the patient is visiting the provider or the doctor, definitely doctor will incur some charges for his appointment or for the procedures that he is performing. So these charges will be sent back to the receptionist. And now the receptionist will go ahead and generate a claim, and that claim will be sent back to the insurance company in order to get the money back to the hospital. Or else, if the patient has to pay, if they do not have an insurance, then yes, patient will go ahead and pay the amount at the receptionist and will leave the hospital. So this is the general workflow. The reason why we, as I said, the reason why we are seeing at the hospital workflow is because we will be referring back to this blueprint many times down the line. So we saw that there is, we saw that uh, the messages are flowing from a receptionist to doctor, doctor to lab, and again from lab to doctor and back to the receptionist. So all of these will happen through a medium called as an interface. An interface is nothing but a bridge or a tunnel which will connect these different components of the healthcare healthcare workflow or the hospital workflow, so that the messages can flow through that bridge or the tunnel. So we'll look at more what an interface is down the line once we kickstart Mirth integration engine. I think someone else joined. Hey Ritesh.
Hey Srinivas.
Hey Ritesh, this is Dixon. I'm the trainer for this
Okay.
session.
Yeah,
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So Ritesh, can you give us quick background about yourself?
Okay. Uh, uh, I'm from Ahmedabad and
Okay.
currently working with an healthcare company, eClinical Works, from
Okay.
last 4 to 5 years
Okay.
around, and currently working in an interface department only,
Okay. Hmm.
and working as a lab data analyst.
Okay. And what exactly you're expecting out of this training?
Actually, to complete a certification, HL7 certification.
Okay.
So I joined the session to see how things works on, you know, for in complete the certification, and to change, I want to change the company, so that's
Okay.
why to have some certification and then apply it to the other companies.
Okay. Yeah. Good. All right. So we just started. So I have completed hospital workflow. So as you are
Okay.
already from healthcare background, I think you are aware of
Yes.
what
Yes.
is the hospital workflow and all.
Yes.
So as I said, so I'll continue. In case if you have any questions, you can stop me and we will continue from there.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. So as I said just now, there is a communication going on between PM system, EHR system, and other systems within this within this hospital workflow, and these communication will happen through an interface, and that interface is nothing but a tunnel or a bridge which will connect PM and EHR system. So as I said, we will look at it more down the line. Um, so before we understand more about HL7, we'll just quickly take a look at an example. So let us say we have two different people. One person is from India and the other person is from uh, China. So both of them don't understand their own language because they know their own languages. Both of them don't understand, uh, don't have a common language to talk to each other. So the Indian guy knows Hindi and the Chinese guy knows Chinese, and there is no proper medium for them to communicate with each other. So either the Indian guy has to learn Chinese to talk to him, or the Chinese guy has to learn Hindi to talk to the Indian guy. So if there is if there is only one other language, the person can manage to learn. But at the same time, if there is another person coming from US and he says that I will try to talk to you, he says that he is trying to communicate in some other language. And now, when these three people want to communicate with each other, there is no common, there is basically each of them have to end up learning two languages each. So, so to avoid this problem, they have decided, or somebody has come into picture, come into play, and decided that we will have one common language which can be used by each and everyone, so that each of the parties involved will not end up in learning multiple languages. Okay, so they have come up with a common language called as English, and they are communicating with each other in English. So each person would end up in learning only one other additional language, not more than one. So this will help for faster communication, easier communication between n number of different parties all over the world. So that has bring down the requirement of learning different languages of different countries, and at the same time enabling the communication between all the different people. HL7 can be compared similar to that. The reason why I say that is when we talk about PM application has its own database, and the architecture of database is completely depends on what data we have and what is how the software application looks and all of these factors. Similarly, EHR application will also have its own database. So when there needs to be an integration between PM and EHR, whenever there is a patient is created in PM application, that has to be sent to EHR, electronic health record, so the doctor can understand and see who the patient is, what is his age and all. At the same time, in case if there is an appointment scheduled in the PM system, that has to go to electronic health record, so that the electronic health record, so the doctor can see in EHR what all the appointment he has. So the data has to be transferred from practice management system to electronic health record system. We know that the databases for both of them is different, and whenever we have to send this data and insert the data into the EHR database, now the person who is going to integrate these two applications has to be aware and has to be aware of both the databases very clearly, so that they can extract the patient data from PM database and send it to the EHR database and insert the data into the EHR database. So if it is one system, then the programmer or the integration engineer can try to understand the architecture of the other database and send it over. But the problem raises when we have more than one system in place. Now, let's say practice management or the electronic health record should also integrate with another external lab. So lab has its own database again. So in case if you want to send some data and insert the data in their database, it again becomes a difficult challenge for the integration engineer, because he has to learn or understand the architecture of the other database as well. So in this way, integrating multiple systems will generate the requirement of learning multiple databases, which is quite impossible for any programmer at the beginning level, or basically it is a time consuming process for the programmer to do so, and there is no common medium or common standard which will enable common communication between all three different applications, which is why HL7 has come into picture, where now in this scenario what happens is the practice management, the interface engineer will pick up the data from the database, convert the data into HL7, and will send the data to and will send the HL7 message to electronic health record. So the person on the other side, or the interface engineer on the electronic health record side, will grab the HL7 message. As this is a common standard like English, they will understand HL7 message, and they will decode the data which is present in HL7 message and will insert the data into the database. Same works with any number of databases that we are interacting with. So what happens is, if we take practice management as a source, and when we are sending the data to different parties, even if there is only one party or 10 different parties, all that the source has to do is generate the HL7 message, which could be understood by everyone in the play, and send that HL7 message to all of them. All that the source engineer has to do is generate HL7 message and send it across. Once that is done, the receiving parties, whether it is 1, 2, 5 or 10, they will receive HL7 messages. They don't need to understand the architecture of the database of PM application. Neither the PM engineer needs to understand the architecture of the other databases. There is a common medium of communication, which is HL7. So if they convert the data into HL7, that's well and good. So this has decreased the need of understanding the architecture of the other side whenever someone is implementing an interface, either that is on PM side or EHR side or with the lab, any party, they just need to understand their own architecture, and then they just have to understand what is HL7. So this has bring down the um, interface implementation time, because generating HL7 message, if understood, is very quick, and at the same time the other person also understands HL7, the other party on the other end also understands the HL7 messaging standard. They will grab the message and immediately insert the data into the database. So that is how HL7 has come into picture. So this is established back in 1987, and this is an ANSI accredited non-profit standard development organization who has brought this into live, so that all of these problems like intercommunication between the systems could be much easier than integrating through XML or integrating between two different databases. And the HL7 name itself comes out from one of the layers of the OSI. So we'll quickly take a look at the OSI layers in the next slide to understand why the name HL7 has been given. And this is being used in more than 28 countries as of today. So there are many countries who are part of it, like Argentina, Australia, India, Korea, and USA, Canada, UK. Most of the countries are using it. So we will see why the name HL7 has come into picture. So if you have an idea about OSI model, OSI model is nothing but a layered model which is used or which is in play right now in the market or in the communication world, where the data which we are seeing in the front end will be converted in the form of packets and will be sent through the hardware over the internet. So this model helps the data to be converted from the soft copy that we are seeing in the front end in the system to a hard packet or certain form which can be sent through the Ethernet cable, and a communication can be enabled between two different parties, whoever is talking to each other. For example, now I'm presenting this on my screen, but you are seeing it on your screen. Apparently, there are 7 layers which will convert the data that I am presenting here, and the data travels all through the hardware or the network wire that we have, and it is reaching you, and there is a reverse conversion at your end, and it is showing it in on your system. So this particular phenomenon is enabled with the help of this OSI model. So this OSI model has 7 layers. Each layer has its own functionality. The uppermost layer is called the application layer, which we usually see on the front end, like the Word document or the presentation that we are seeing right now is the actual uh, application layer. Underneath it, there are 6 more layers, which will finally convert whatever we are seeing in the front end into packets, into physical packets, and those packets will travel through the network and will reach the other end of the communication. So whenever we are trying to convert an HL7, or whenever we are trying to extract data from database and construct an HL7 message, we are we'll be doing that in the application layer, because we'll be using an application or a tool, integration tool, which will integrate with database or which will integrate with other communication systems, and HL7 will be entirely played in the application layer only, which is why the name has come out saying health level 7. So as this is the seventh layer, and we are talking about health level, the name is given as health level 7. So that is what HL7 is all about. So if you take an overview of HL7, what is HL7? Like any other language, so more than language, I would say it as a messaging standard. HL7 has its own grammar and syntax, how it can be read. If you take a look at XML, XML has its own structure of having tags, start tag, end tag. And if you look at JSON, JSON has its own syntax like key and value pairs. In the same way, HL7 has its own grammar and syntax. So there are 12 chapters and 5 apprentices in version 2.3. There are latest versions as well, 2.5 and 2.7, and version 3 as well. Version 3 is not widely accepted by the industry for many reasons, because of its complication, because of the change in the entire messaging structure. But still now you will see that there are many people who are using version 2.7 or 2.5 for their interface implementations. There is a new standard called as FHIR. FHIR is will be used robustly down the line, because it will help to integrate mobile integrations and other wearable devices integrations as that uses REST services. So we'll have a brief session on FHIR at the end of the entire training. But the wide one that we use right now in the market from HL7 perspective is 2.5 or 2.7. And within HL7 standards, we have 50, more than 50 data types. There are close to 89 data types, and there are more than 80 message types, and there are more than 86 event types. So each of these events and message types represents different events which happens in the real-time world. We'll be looking at main events, which we will be looking at few of the main events which we cover, which will be part of the hospital workflow that we discussed today. So if you look at the history, HL7 has been officially aired in 1997 with version 2.3. It started in 87, but still it aired in 1997 and was released into the market so that it can officially be used. And then we have 2.3.1 in 99, and from there on till 2015, we had the latest version of version 3. But as I said, the 2000 version 3 is not widely accepted. Only 10 or 15% of all the systems out there in the world will be using 3. But the rest of the people will be using 2.7 or 2.5, the regular standard that we have. And then FHIR is the latest standard. This is not HL7. This is based on XML and JSON message structures. FHIR is the acronym. The full form is Fast Health Interoperability Resources. So basically, this is designed to bring a standard in order to integrate devices using REST services. So as I said in the previous slide, we will take a look at FHIR down the line. Once we complete the entire training, we'll have a session on HIE as well as FHIR, just to get basic gist of understanding of what it is. So let us quickly look at the advantages of the HL7. So now that we have a standard messaging methodology, we'll be able to share medical data and demographic data, billing data with all the applications that supports HL7. And data transfer will always be in the form of messages. So we don't much need to worry about how we go ahead and integrate with the systems on the other end by directly accessing their databases and all. So there are no special tools required apart from an interface engine. So you can use an interface engine to go ahead and extract the data and convert the data into HL7. And then code is in ASCII format, which means if you understand the if you understand the structure, you will understand what is the data content of the HL7 message. It is not like something you have to encode and decode. When I say encode, something which can be encoded into a form which is not human readable. HL7 is not that way. If you see the message, you will understand what HL7 is. If you're understanding the structure, then you will be able to figure out what is the data present within that message. And it is OS independent. It can work on any OS. As we are dealing with the HL7 message at the application layer, each and every operating system will have an application layer. So independent of the OS, whether it is Linux, Unix, Ubuntu, or Windows or Mac, it will work. So it will help us to connect from any system to any system, as I said before. Not only that, it will also assist us to generate or access the overseas market. So why do we need these standards? One of the main important thing is it will enable sharing of medical data, and there is accessibility to larger subset of data. Like in case if there is an integration between two different systems without HL7, it might be limited, or the time taken for that will be huge. But when we talk from HL7 perspective, we have a systematic methodology of what kind of data has to be transmitted and how can we limit or extend the content of the data that has to be transmitted. So those things can be taken care with the help of these standards. And because of these standards, there is quicker insurance claim payments, and there is a quicker turnaround time in order to go ahead and get the claim settled, as well as there is a quicker turnaround time to get the lab orders and results communication between lab and the hospitals. So these standards help us to maintain these things better than with the manual process that we have. Then it will enable the apps to talk to each other, which is the best part, so that the patient doesn't need to run here and there to go ahead and get the data. Like they will have to go to doctor, and then in case if there is a lab that has to be performed, then they will have to go to the lab and get the results, go 3 or 4 times to get the results and come back to the doctor. So all of these things can be avoided because apps are talking to each other with the help of HL7. And there is a greater safety for the patient because this can be discussed from many perspectives, like especially when we talk about labs, uh, we patients don't need to run here and there. In cases of emergency, they will immediately get the results, and they can take a look at the results directly on the screen and take steps of procedures that they have to perform. And HL7 is this standard is accredited by an organization called as HL7 organization. Uh, so they maintain the entire standards. They keep releasing the every standard, and it is accredited body and a registered body. And above that, there is a bigger market, and because as they can get the claim settled easily, they can reach out to they can spread to many number of hospitals or many number of labs, which will increase the market margin. Above all of these things, there is a lot of quality in taking for the patient care. So let us understand how HL7 messaging standard works. So we saw that when we were talking about hospital workflow, we did see that there is a patient who is visiting the receptionist, and the receptionist will collect the data from the patient, the demographic data, first name, his name, date of birth, his few personal details, and if he has insurance or not, and all of these things. Once these things are captured, they will save the data in the PM application. So once the data is saved, apparently this data has to flow from PM to HR. So this is a requirement which got generated, where the data has to flow from the PM system to EHR system. So this entire thing, that is an entire action that is happening, which is capturing the data from the patient and inserting or saving the data within the application, is considered as an event. So this event where the requirement of the data that has to go from one system to the another system is generated, is called as a trigger event. So all the HL7 transactions will work on this principle, that the data in the real-time world, or an event in the real-time world, has generated the necessity of data to flow from one system to the another. So this event is called as a trigger event, and there are many such kind of events which will happen in the real-time world, which will generate the necessity of the data to flow from one system to the another system. In our example, the demographic data that is captured in the front end has to go to the EHR, because so that there will be some basic information of the patient who is going to come, who is going to visit the hospital, or who is at the front end and who is going to meet the doctor. So in this way, another event that we can consider is doctor placing an order with the laboratory. So they will send out an order. They will enter the data order details of, for example, a blood culture, and they will send that information to the lab. So this is an event. In this way, there are series of events that happens in the hospital workflow that we discussed, which we'll take a look at in a few minutes. But the whole point is, these events, which are called as trigger events, will generate the necessity of data flow, and HL7 standards or HL7 completely works on this event driven methodology. So any questions till now?
No, sir.
All
Okay with it.
right.
No
Yeah.
question.
Okay. So let us jump. So till here we understood the regular theoretical part. We'll quickly jump into what are the events that we have next, and what are the things that we'll look at from HL7 perspective. What are the events we have from HL7 perspective as well. So as I said, HL7 completely works on event-based methodology, event-driven methodology. So we'll divide these events that we come across in the hospital workflow, so that we can break them up, and then try understanding each of those events. So when the patient visits the hospital, the first thing that they usually get done is the registration. So once the registration is done, they will get the appointment scheduled, like for which doctor they are visiting the hospital for. So the registration part is considered as one event, and the appointment scheduling is considered as another event. And then you have labs. So labs will be considered as another event. Within labs, you have two different events again. One is placing an order, and the other one is receiving a result back from the lab. And you have charges related events, and then you have pharmaceutical or insurance related events. So these are 5 different events that we'll come across when we are talking about hospital workflow. Pharmacy and insurances are not based out of HL7 transactions. They are based out of X12 standards and ERX standards, which are totally different. So we will be excluding that from our training sessions. We'll be mainly looking at the other events like registration, appointments, labs, and charges. So before we understand what are the events, let us try to understand what is the anatomy of an HL7 message. So if you look at, so we'll quickly take a look at an example before we understand the anatomy of the message. Let us say there are two different people in the house. Okay. Okay. Even before that, I would like to illustrate another example. So let us say it is 8 o'clock in or 9 o'clock in the night, and the power is gone. So we don't have the electricity at home, and it is completely dark. What is the first thing that we do? The first thing that we do is we just walk up to certain location at home, and we will pick up the candle or the light or torch or whatever it is. We will try to go ahead and pick it up, and we'll have some light at home. Even if it is dark, we are able to navigate or go to the place where it is stored. So the reason how we can do that, because we know that we know that this particular thing will be placed at certain location at home. Or in case if someone is asking for keys, we just say that uh, we just say that even if it is dark, we can go ahead and get the keys, because we know that we keep them at certain location at home. HL7 also works very similar to that way. Uh, there are dedicated placeholders for data elements when we talk about HL7. Let us understand it with one more example. So let us say there are two persons at a home, and there is a rack at home, and the first rack will store all the clothes, second will store books, and third one is also storing the books. So each of these racks are again divided into individual compartments, and first compartment is having t-shirts, and second compartment is having trousers, and third one is having shirts. So one of the person who is staying at home has left the house and went out, and after an hour he is calling the other person who is still at home, and he is telling him that, hey, can you get me the t-shirt? The second person will go get the t-shirt. He will go to the rack, he will access the first compartment, get the t-shirt, and he will go and give that t-shirt to the other guy who is outside home. Now when there is a communication between the first guy and the second guy, the second guy who is outside and not at home did not navigate or did not tell the first guy where to get the t-shirt from. The first guy knew it already that the t-shirts are in first rack and first compartment. How does he know? Because that is a defined structure, which is or defined structure within their home, and they understand that they don't need to communicate that with each other. HL7 messaging standard, as I said, with these two examples, we have dedicated placeholders for each data element that we are dealing with in the front end. For example, if I say that there is first name of a patient, first name and last name, these fields or data components will be sent in certain locations within HL7 message. So once we understand the structure of the HL7 message, you will be able to relate more to that, why we have dedicated placeholders for each message, each data piece that we handle in the front end. So we'll look at a deeper, look at little deeper into the message anatomy. So each message will have a segment, and each segment will have a field. Each field is again divided into components, and each component is again divided into subcomponents. Let us relate it back to the example that we have seen just now. So each message has a segment which can be compared to one rack each. Within the rack, we have one shelf, second shelf, third shelf, fourth shelf. We have four different shelves. Each shelf can be compared or considered as a segment, and each segment is again divided into individual compartments called as fields. So these fields will have the data elements that we are talking about. Like first field is for name, second field is for patient MRN number, third one is for date of birth, uh, fourth one is for gender, and so on. But when I say that first field should have first name of the patient, then field will have name of the patient, and it will not have anything else. It will not have date of birth, it will not have gender, it will not have any other thing apart from the name. So at that point, I'm deciding that the first compartment or the first field is always dedicated for one data piece or one data element, that is patient name. So when that has been decided or concluded, no other data field or data piece will be held in this particular field. So this is a small example that we are looking at, but in real time we have compartments within each segment which are called as fields, and those fields will have dedicated data elements going in them or getting stored in them. And if that particular field is not present, that particular field will be empty, but it will not have or it will not hold any other data. So again, each field is again divided into components. Components will again be divided into subcomponents. So we will stop at fields right now, because once we understand the concept of fields, what are the segments and fields, then understanding components and subcomponents will be easier. Now we will look at message delimiters. So like every language that is out there, every language has its own grammar and syntax. As we have discussed in the earlier slides, every grammar has its own syntax. In the same way, HL7 has its own syntax, which can be compared to a few other things in the English language. So let us take a look at each one of them, what we use in HL7 messaging standard. One is segment terminator. Segment terminator in the sense, at the end of each segment, there will be a segment terminator. This is like a full stop. At the end of each sentence, we have a full stop, so that so the reader can understand that the next sentence is going to start. In the same way, a segment terminator is represented by a carriage return, and it is present at the end of each segment, so that the program which is going to parse or which is going to interpret the HL7 message can understand that there is a segment terminator at the end of each segment, and that segment terminator is represented by a carriage return, and hello, hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think it got disconnected. We'll continue. All right, so I'm sorry guys, I we lost the power here, so it got disconnected. Anyways, so we were looking at the message grammar or the syntax for each HL7 message that we have. So the segment terminator will indicate that there is an end of the segment. It is kind of a full stop which you can compare with. And then field separator. Field separator is similar to a space. When we have two words, we have space between each word. So field separator is nothing, can be similarly compared to a space where each field will separate each data element. And then we have component separator. Within fields we have components, and each hey, is someone outside? We are able
Yes.
to hear a lot of background noise. Yeah, thank you. So each field will have components, as we have seen in the previous slide, and these components are separated with the help of a caret. So the cap symbol is used as caret symbol. So we use that to separate two components which are present within a field. And then subcomponent separator. So the components are again divided into subcomponents. So to divide two subcomponents, we use ampersand. And then we have two other additional delimiters called as a repetition separator and escape character. We will discuss about these two when we are talking about the real-time messages, because it will be little confusing right now. So once we completely understand what HL7 message is, when we are talking about each and every field, we will take examples to look at what is a repetition separator and what is escape character. Okay, but for now we need to understand at least the segment terminator, field separator, component separator. So we'll quickly take a look at how HL7 message looks. So this is a sample HL7 message. We are seeing that we have pipe symbol, we have caret symbol, we have repetition separator and all of these things, and there is some sort of data here. So we'll see what are these. So the first one is called as a message. A message is nothing but message segment header. This is segment 1. Then EVN, this is segment 2. Then PID, that is segment 3. So in this way, we have multiple segments. This is one message, and within this one message, we have 5 different segments: a message, EVN, PID, NK1, PV1. So these are 5 different segments. Each segment has its own name. The first 3 letters of any segment will represent what that segment is. So for example, if you are looking at the third segment, it says PID. PID is nothing but patient identification. So this particular segment will have information which will help us to identify a patient. So we will be looking at all the possible segments for all the message types that we have during the course of this training. But for our understanding now, we need to understand that each message has different segments. Each segment has its own name, and first 3 letters of each segment or first 2 letters of each segment will represent what that name is. And if we take a deeper look into each segment has pipes. So if you remember the example that we were talking about, where we had a rack, and in each rack we have divided few compartments, and each compartment is holding certain type of material. In the same way, each segment has pipes. Pipes are nothing but the dividing walls between the compartments. So we are separating each field with the help of pipe. And if you look at this one, each field will be counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on. Okay, so when we talk, we are seeing here
Each
that,
row is a segment. Each row is a segment, I think.
right, each row is a segment. Hello?
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so each row is a segment, and within each row you have multiple, you can say multiple columns, or and each column is called as field, and each field will be held between 2 different pipes, and they will be read as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So in this case, we are seeing that this is the first field. In this case, we are seeing that this is the first field which is empty, and second field we have some data, third field we have some data, fourth field is empty, fifth field we have some data. So as per HL7 standards, PID 5 is name. So we are seeing that first field, second field, third field, fourth field, and the fifth field has the name. So when I'm reading an HL7 message, I'll read it as PID 5. When we are talking or when we are conversing with another programmer who is at the other end, I will tell that I'm sending the patient name in PID 5. He will take a look at PID 5, and he will try to determine what is the name that is being received in the HL7 message. So we have certain tools for us to read this better instead of just looking at it and trying to read one by one. If we keep on reading, if you want to look at the phone number, we can say that this is phone number 216731432 is the phone number just by looking at it. But what is the field number of this particular phone number? Then we usually keep start reading from the beginning, right? Like 1 2 3 4. So to avoid all of these, we have certain tools which will break this message for us. And during the upcoming sessions, we will take a look at the tools that we have to break the HL7 message and read them. And there are tools which will also tell you what is that field, what does that field indicate. For example, PID3 is for MRN number or patient ID, so it will tell you that this particular field is dedicated for patient number, and PID5 is dedicated for patient name, and PID7 is dedicated for date of birth, and so on. So in this way, each HL7 message will have multiple segments. Each segment will have multiple fields. Each field will have multiple components. So what are components? If you look at PID5 from this message, PID5 has test caret John. So the patient name is held between one field. However, patient name has different components: first name, last name, date of birth, first name, last name, middle initial, and in case if there is a suffix or a prefix, that is also a possibility. So each field has, if it has different components, then those components are separated with the help of a caret. As patient has two main components, we have many other components, but we'll take a look at only two of them. As patient has first name and last name, which are the bare minimum components of any name, then the last name is separated from the first name with the help of a caret. And first name is a component and the last name is a component, and both of them are held in PID5 of the HL7 message. So any questions with the structure of the message?
No, from my
Okay.
side, no.
All right. So with HL7, we will take so now that we understood the structure, we'll take a look at what are the segments, what are the fields, what are the required fields, what are the optional fields, what are the different message types we have, what are the different event types we have in further sessions. But this is the basic structure: how to read an HL7 message, how to understand what are the segments and fields of the HL7 message that we have. And then we have, in case if you want to go for training and certification in HL7, you can go for that. There are many means how you can go ahead and prepare. You can self-study. Few people will attend some seminars and webinars in order to complete the training and go for certification. So we have at least 6 7 different chapters within HL7 guide, HL7 program, but out of that only chapter 2 plays a major role. Chapter 2, chapter 2 and chapter 2b, these are 3 different books we have to complete in order to attend for certification exam and crack it. So certification is done only by HL7 organization, not by any other organization. So this is the only organization which is allowed or which is permitted to go ahead and do so. And exams are regularly held all over the world, so you can give an attempt anytime. Now in these days, you can write it from home in case if you have all the equipment which is required by them. Um, you can go ahead and there is some software which will lock your system and just will show up the exam paper and all. So you can go ahead and write the exam that way just by sitting at home by registering it. So who can train in HL7? There are many players in the market who can get trained on HL7. Basically, usually in US, most of the doctors understand it, and IT administrators understand it. But if it is needed at the intermediate level, programmers have to understand it in order to implement the implementations. And with experts, for the expert level, architects or the programmers of the healthcare app should understand, and domain experts also should understand HL7 message. So to summarize our session, HL7 is mandatory for interoperability, because without that, forming a communication between two different systems or enabling them is very difficult, because there is no other standard which can replace this. Even if FHIR is there, it is an additional component which has come into play into the market today, but that cannot replace HL7 message for many reasons. Like HL7 is used for transactional messaging standard, as transactional messaging standard, where messages are transacted, or messages are used or generated in the real-time world whenever there is a necessity. But FHIR is used for um, FHIR is used as part of request and response messaging standard, not the transactional basis, not on basis of transactions. And HL7 is mandatory in order to have overseas market, and they have made it a standard. Most of the countries are following it now. And as soon as, if you are into healthcare IT, then try to learn HL7 as soon as possible, because that will help you a lot. Because there is no escape from it for at least for the next 20 years, 10, 20 years, unless we come up with any other replacement. So that ends our session. Any questions, any one of you?
Nothing, all good.
Okay. All right, Addy, any questions from you?
No more questions, sir.
All right. All right. So we'll end our session today, and we'll have our next session in the next week. So you can communicate with Srinivas. If you're planning to continue, then we can start the sessions next week. Anyways, we will be starting a batch, so you can join that batch. So nice talking to you all. I hope you have Srinivas's contact, and you can take it from there.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
You
Thank you,
can share
everyone.
in chat Srinivas number, the same number, na? WhatsApp number, I think.
Yeah, it's the same number, right?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. You all have a good day.